My parents chose my sister's lies over my dying grandmother's final wish, and what happened next tore our family apart forever. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how my family tried to steal my inheritance while my grandmother was still alive, and how standing up to them cost me everything except my self-respect. My grandmother Rose was the strongest person I ever knew. She raised 4 kids as a single mother after my grandfather died in a construction accident when my mom was just 12. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, cleaning houses during the day and waiting tables at night. She never complained, never made excuses, just worked until her hands were raw and her feet were swollen. By the time I was born, she had saved enough to buy a small house outright, and that house became the center of our family. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday, every important moment happened in that kitchen with the yellow wallpaper and the smell of her homemade bread filling every corner. I was always closest to her out of all the grandchildren. My older sister, Chelsea, was too busy with her social life to spend time with an old woman. My younger cousins were scattered across different states and barely visited. But me, I came over every week, sometimes twice a week. I'd help her with groceries, fix things around the house, sit with her while she watched her game shows and told me stories about the old days. She taught me how to balance a checkbook, how to save money, how to spot a liar from a mile away. She said I reminded her of herself when she was young, stubborn, honest, and not afraid of hard work. When I turned 25, my grandmother sat me down at her kitchen table and told me something that would change everything. She said she had updated her will and wanted me to know what was in it. The house, the one she had worked her entire life to pay off, was going to me. Not to be split among her kids or grandchildren, but to me alone. She said I was the only one who ever really cared about her, who showed up when it wasn't convenient, who loved her for who she was instead of what she could give. She made me promise not to tell anyone until after she was gone because she knew it would cause problems. I promised, even though the weight of that secret felt like carrying stones in my chest. But secrets have a way of coming out, and this one came out in the worst possible way. My grandmother got sick 2 years after that conversation. Cancer, aggressive and fast-moving. The doctors gave her 6 months, maybe less. My mom and her siblings suddenly became very attentive, visiting constantly, bringing flowers and cards, acting like they had been devoted children all along. It made me sick watching them perform grief while my grandmother was still alive, still watching them with those sharp eyes that saw through everything. One afternoon, I arrived at the hospital to find my sister Chelsea in the room alone with my grandmother. That should have been my first warning. Chelsea never visited alone. She always came with my mom or brought her kids as props to look like a caring granddaughter. But there she was, sitting close to the bed, holding my grandmother's hand, speaking in a low, urgent voice. I stood outside the door for a moment and heard Chelsea say something about the house, about how it would be better if grandmother changed her will to split everything equally among the grandchildren. My stomach dropped. She was trying to manipulate a dying woman into changing her will. I walked in and Chelsea jumped like she'd been caught stealing. My grandmother looked exhausted, her face gray against the white hospital pillow. I asked Chelsea what she was talking about, and she gave me this sweet, innocent smile and said she was just making conversation, just letting grandmother know that whatever she decided, the family would understand. But I saw right through it. My grandmother saw it too. She told Chelsea to leave, her voice weak but firm. Chelsea left in a huff, shooting me a look that could have melted steel. After she was gone, my grandmother grabbed my hand with surprising strength. She told me to be careful, that my family was going to come after the house the moment she died, that I needed to be prepared for a fight. She said she had already talked to her lawyer and everything was in order, but that wouldn't stop them from trying. I promised her I would fight if I had to, even though the thought of going to war with my own family made me feel sick. My grandmother died 3 weeks later. I was with her at the end, holding her hand while she took her last breath. My mom showed up 10 minutes too late, crying loudly in the hallway. Chelsea arrived even later with red eyes that looked more angry than sad. The funeral was a performance. Everyone crying, everyone sharing memories they had probably made up on the drive over. I sat in the front row, silent and dry-eyed, Not because I didn't care, but because my grief was too big for tears. It felt like someone had carved out part of my chest and left a hollow space that echoed with every breath. The day after the funeral, my mom called a family meeting at her house. I didn't want to go, but I knew avoiding it would only make things worse. When I arrived, the living room was full. My mom, my dad, Chelsea and her husband, my Aunt Linda, my Uncle Mark, even some cousins I hadn't seen in years. My mom had printed out an agenda like this was a board meeting. The first item was my grandmother's estate. My mom started by saying that grandmother's was going to be read by the lawyer the following week, but she wanted to discuss expectations as a family first. She said everything should be divided equally among her children, since that's what would be fair. My Aunt Linda agreed immediately. My Uncle Mark nodded along. Then Chelsea spoke up and said the house should probably be sold and the money split among all the grandchildren too, since grandmother loved all of us equally. I felt my face get hot. This was exactly what my grandmother had warned me about. I told them the will was already written and whatever grandmother wanted would be honored. My mom gave me this patronizing smile and said of course we would honor it, but that didn't mean we couldn't discuss what was fair. I asked her what made her think grandmother's wishes wouldn't be fair. The room went quiet. Chelsea said that grandmother was old and might have been confused when she made the will, that maybe she didn't understand what she was doing. I stood up and told them they were disgusting for even suggesting that. My grandmother was sharper than all of them combined until the day she died, and they knew it. My dad finally spoke up and said I was being disrespectful and needed to calm down. Calm down? They were planning to contest a will before it was even read, and I was the one who needed to calm down? I told them I was leaving and that they could discuss whatever they wanted, but it wouldn't change anything. Chelsea called after me saying I was being selfish and that I always thought I was better than everyone else. I walked out without responding. The will reading happened the following Tuesday. The lawyer's office was small and smelled like old paper and coffee. My mom and her siblings sat on one side of the table. Chelsea sat next to my mom. I sat alone on the other side, feeling like I was facing a firing squad. The lawyer, an older man named Mr. Peterson, read through the will in a monotone voice. Small items and keepsakes were distributed to various family members. Some money was left to my mom and her siblings, about $15,000 each. Then he got to the house. As my grandmother had told me, it was left entirely to me, along with the remainder of her savings, about $40,000. The room erupted. My mom started crying immediately, saying it wasn't fair, that her mother had been manipulated. My Aunt Linda accused me of poisoning grandmother against the rest of the family. Uncle Mark sat there shaking his head like he'd just witnessed a crime. Chelsea stood up and pointed at me, her voice shaking with rage, and said I had stolen from the family, that I had taken advantage of an old woman. Mr. Peterson tried to calm everyone down, explaining that the will was legally sound, that my grandmother had been evaluated by 2 doctors who confirmed she was of sound mind when she made these decisions, and that there were detailed notes explaining her reasoning. My mom demanded to see the notes. Mr. Peterson hesitated, then read from a document my grandmother had written and signed. She explained that I was the only grandchild who had consistently shown her love and care, that I had been there for her when no one else was, and that she wanted to make sure I was taken care of. She also wrote that she knew this decision would cause conflict, but she hoped her family would respect her wishes and understand that love and care cannot be manufactured at the end of someone's life. The room went silent after that. Then my mom stood up and said she was contesting the will. My aunt and uncle agreed immediately. Chelsea said she would do whatever it took to make this right. I looked at Mr. Peterson and asked how strong their case was. He said that given the medical evaluations, the detailed notes, and the fact that the will had been updated years before my grandmother got sick, their chances of successfully contesting it were extremely low. But that didn't mean they couldn't try, and trying would cost everyone time and money. I told them to do whatever was necessary to protect my grandmother's wishes. My family left the office without saying another word to me. The next 6 months were a nightmare. My family hired a lawyer and filed a contest claiming undue influence and lack of mental capacity. It was absurd and insulting, but it was also expensive and exhausting. I had to hire my own lawyer, gather evidence, provide testimony about my relationship with my grandmother. Meanwhile, my family launched a campaign to turn everyone against me. They called relatives, posted vague things on social media about betrayal and greed, and told anyone who would listen that I had stolen their inheritance. But here's what they didn't expect. Other people started speaking up. My grandmother's neighbors, the ones I had helped shovel snow for and run errands for when I visited her, wrote letters to my lawyer describing how often I was there and how my grandmother would light up when I arrived. Her church friends, the ones I had driven her to see when she could no longer drive herself, provided statements about our relationship. Even her doctor wrote a letter explaining that she had discussed her will with him multiple times and was absolutely certain about her decision. The evidence was overwhelming. The case was dismissed after 6 months. The judge ruled that there was no basis for the contest and that my grandmother's will would stand as written. I should have felt relieved, but I just felt empty. I had won legally, but I had lost my family. My mom stopped speaking to me entirely. Chelsea blocked me on everything and told mutual friends that I was dead to her. My dad sent me one text saying he was disappointed in how I had handled everything, as if I was the one who had caused the problem. I moved into my grandmother's house a month after the case was settled. It felt strange at first, living in a place that held so many memories. But slowly, it started to feel like home. I painted the walls, updated the kitchen, and turned one of the bedrooms into an office. I kept some of my grandmother's things, the quilts she made, her recipe box, photos from her younger years, and packed away the rest. Every time I walked through that front door, I thought about how hard she had worked to buy this place, and I promised myself I would take care of it the way she had taken care of me. But the family drama wasn't over. 6 months after I moved in, my mom showed up unannounced. She knocked on the door on a Saturday morning, and when I opened it, she was standing there with red eyes like she'd been crying. She asked if we could talk, and I let her in, mostly because I was too shocked to say no. We sat in the living room, the same room where I used to watch TV with my grandmother, and my mom started talking. She said she had been thinking a lot about everything that happened, about the will and the contest and how the family had fallen apart. Then she said something that made my blood boil. She said that maybe we could work something out, that maybe I could sell the house and split the money with the family, so we could all move on. I stared at her in disbelief. After everything, after the lawyers and the accusations and the months of being treated like a criminal, she thought I would just hand over the house? I asked her if she was serious. She started crying and said that it was what my grandmother would have wanted, that she wouldn't have wanted the family to be torn apart like this. I told her that my grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she left the house to me, that she knew it would cause problems, and she did it anyway, because she wanted me to have it. My mom said I was being selfish and stubborn. I told her to leave. She stood up and said she hoped I could live with myself, knowing I had destroyed the family over a house. I walked to the door and opened it. Before she left, she turned and said that Chelsea was struggling financially, that she could really use some help, and that as her sister I should want to help her. I asked why Chelsea's financial problems were my responsibility. My mom said that's what family does. They help each other. I told her that family also shows up before someone dies, not just when there's money involved. She left without another word. That visit broke something in me. Any remaining hope I had for reconciliation disappeared. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as an obstacle between them and money they felt entitled to. I blocked my mom's number after that. I blocked Chelsea, my aunt, my uncle, everyone who had participated in the contest or supported it. I kept my dad unblocked for reasons I couldn't explain, maybe because he had stayed mostly silent during the worst of it, but he never reached out, so it didn't matter. Life went on. I got promoted at work, started dating someone wonderful named Marcus who knew my whole story and didn't judge me for it. I made friends with my neighbors, the same ones who had written letters for me during the case. I hosted Thanksgiving in my house, my grandmother's house, and filled it with people who actually cared about me. It felt good. Better than good. It felt like I was finally building something real. Then 2 years after the will was settled, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my Uncle Mark. His voice sounded different, softer, almost apologetic. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking and realized he had been wrong to support the contest. He said my grandmother had every right to leave her house to whoever she wanted, and that he was sorry for the pain he had caused. I didn't know what to say. Sorry felt too small for what they had put me through. He asked if we could meet for coffee sometime just to talk. I told him I'd think about it, and hung up. I did think about it. For weeks. Part of me wanted to meet him, to hear what he had to say, to maybe start healing some of the family wounds. But another part of me remembered the way he had sat in that lawyer's office and nodded along while my aunt accused me of manipulation. I remembered the months of legal battles and the way my entire family had turned on me without even asking for my side of the story. And I realized that forgiveness doesn't mean letting people back in. It just means letting go of the anger. So I never call him back. But the cracks in my family's united front were starting to show. I heard through a mutual friend that Chelsea and her husband had separated. Apparently, her husband was tired of her constant complaints about money and her obsession with the house I had inherited. My Aunt Linda had stopped speaking to my mom after an argument about who should have fought harder during the contest. My Uncle Mark had distanced himself from everyone. The family that had been so united in their anger toward me was falling apart from the inside. My mom made one more attempt to reach out. She sent me a letter, handwritten on floral stationery. It was 4 pages long, rambling and emotional. She talked about how hard it had been to lose her mother, how difficult the whole situation had made everything, how she wished we could be a family again. But nowhere in those 4 pages did she actually apologize. Nowhere did she acknowledge that she had been wrong to contest the will or wrong to accuse me of manipulation. She just wanted things to go back to normal, to pretend nothing had happened. I read the letter once, put in a drawer, and never responded. Marcus and I got engaged that spring. Simple proposal in the backyard of the house, under the apple tree my grandmother had planted 30 years ago. I posted one photo on social media, just of the ring and the tree. I didn't tag anyone or write anything sentimental. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing. Messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, all congratulating me, all acting like we had never stopped speaking. I deleted them all. They didn't get to be part of my happy moments after trying to destroy me during the hard ones. We planned a small wedding for the following fall. 50 people, close friends, Marcus's family, the neighbors who had become like family to me. I didn't invite my parents or Chelsea or any of the relatives who had sided with them during the contest. I didn't send announcements or explanations. I just moved forward with my life as if they didn't exist. Marcus asked me once if I felt guilty about it. I told him I felt free. The wedding was perfect. We got married in the backyard under that same apple tree. My grandmother wasn't there, but I felt her presence in every detail. The recipe cards I had used to make the cake, the quilt draped over the gift table, the photos I had placed around the yard showing her young and smiling and full of life. During the ceremony, I thank her out loud for giving me more than just a house, for giving me the strength to stand up for myself, for teaching me that love is shown through actions, not words, and for believing in me when no one else did. 3 days after the wedding, my dad texted me. It was the first time I had heard from him in over 2 years. He said he had heard I got married and wanted to congratulate me. He said he was proud of me for building a life for myself and that he hoped I was happy. Then he said something that surprised me. He said he was sorry, not for any specific thing, just sorry in general. I stared at that text for a long time before responding. I told him thank you, that I was happy, and that I appreciated him reaching out. I didn't say I forgave him. I didn't say I wanted a relationship. I just acknowledged the message and left it at that. Marcus and I settled into married life. We both worked from home a few days a week, had dinners in the kitchen where my grandmother used to cook, and talked about maybe starting a family someday. The house felt full in a way it hadn't in years. Not full of stuff, but full of life and love and possibility. I had turned my grandmother's legacy into something beautiful, and that felt like the best way to honor her. Then, 4 years after my grandmother died, I got a call that changed everything again. It was from a hospital. My mom had been in a car accident. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that she needed surgery and would be in recovery for weeks. The nurse asked if I could come down to fill out some paperwork since Chelsea was unreachable and I was listed as the secondary emergency contact. I told the nurse I would be there in an hour. When I arrived, I found my dad in the waiting room. He looked older, grayer, more tired than I remembered. He stood when he saw me, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Then he said, "Thank you for coming." We sat down together, and he filled me in on what happened. My mom had been driving home from Chelsea's house when someone ran a red light and hit her car. She had a broken leg, some broken ribs, and needed surgery to repair internal bleeding. She would be okay, but it would be a long recovery. I asked where Chelsea was. My dad said she was going through her own crisis right now and couldn't handle dealing with this too. That was typical. I asked if my mom knew I was there. He said no. She had been unconscious since the accident. I filled out the paperwork, made sure the hospital had all the information they needed, and prepared to leave. My dad stopped me and asked if I would stay until she woke up. Just until she woke up. I told him I didn't think that was a good idea. He said, "Please," and something about the way he said it made me stay. My mom woke up 3 hours later, groggy from medication, confused about where she was. She saw my dad first. Then her eyes moved to me, sitting in the chair by the window. For a moment, she just stared like she was trying to figure out if I was real. Then she started crying. Not loud, dramatic crying, but quiet tears that rolled down her cheeks and onto the hospital pillow. She said my name, just my name, and it sounded like a question and an apology all at once. I walked over to the bed. My dad stepped back to give us space. I asked her how she was feeling, and she said everything hurt. Then she said she was sorry. Really sorry. Not about the accident, but about everything else. About the will contest, about choosing Chelsea's lies over my truth, about letting greed destroy our family. She said she had spent 4 years regretting it, but she was too proud and too ashamed to reach out. She said seeing me there after everything she had done made her realize how much she had lost. I stood there listening, not sure what to feel. Part of me wanted to walk out. Part of me wanted to tell her it was too late, that sorry wasn't enough. But another part of me, the part that sounded like my grandmother, reminded me that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. So I told her I heard her, that I appreciated the apology, but that we had a long way to go before I could trust her again. She nodded, still crying, and said she understood. She said she would do whatever it took to earn my forgiveness, even if it took the rest of her life. Marcus and I talked about it that night. He asked what I wanted to do, and I told him I honestly didn't know. Part of me wanted to maintain the boundaries I had built. Those boundaries had protected me and given me peace. But another part of me wondered if maybe, just maybe, some relationships deserved a second chance. Not because the other person earned it, but because holding the door closed forever took more energy than opening it just a crack. I visited my mom twice during her recovery. Short visits, awkward conversations, careful steps towards something that might eventually look like reconciliation. She didn't make excuses or try to justify what she had done. She just listened when I talked about how much she had hurt me, and she took responsibility for her choices. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't erase the past, but it was something. Chelsea never reached out. Not during my mom's recovery. Not after, not ever. I heard she had moved 2 states away and was barely in contact with the family. My dad said she was still bitter about the house, still convinced she had been wronged. Some people never change, and that's okay. I didn't need her approval or her forgiveness. I just needed to live my life free from her toxicity. 5 years after my grandmother died, Marcus and I had our first child, a daughter. We named her Rose, after my grandmother. My mom cried when I told her the name, said it was beautiful and that my grandmother would have been so proud. My dad sent a gift, a savings bond for Rose's future with a note saying he hoped to be part of her life if I would let him. I put the bond in a safe place and thought about it for a while. Eventually, I decided that my daughter deserved to know her grandparents, even if those relationships looked different than traditional families. We set clear boundaries. Visits were scheduled and supervised. Conversations about the past were off limits. My parents had to earn trust slowly over time, through consistent actions and respect for my rules. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks, but slowly something like a relationship began to form. Looking back now, I understand that some family rifts can't be healed. Some betrayals cut too deep. But I also learned that forgiveness isn't about letting people off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of carrying their mistakes. My grandmother gave me more than a house. She gave me the gift of knowing my worth, of understanding that love without respect is worthless, and that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. I still live in that house, the one my grandmother worked so hard to buy, the one my family tried to take from me, the one that became my sanctuary and my battlefield. Now it's filled with new memories, birthday parties and holiday dinners, my daughter's first steps in the living room, Marcus and I slow dancing in the kitchen at midnight. This house has seen betrayal and loss, but it's also seen redemption and love. And every day I walk through that front door, I think about my grandmother and how she knew exactly what she was doing when she left it to me. She wasn't just giving me a house. She was giving me a foundation to build a life on my own terms. And that's exactly what I did.